Hello and welcome to another episode of The Presbyterian. Today I join Professor Lawrence Kirkpatrick here in his home, and we're just going to chat a little bit about where things are at in Presbyterian Church in Ireland, and be able to share both of our stories. I didn't know Lawrence at all. Another one of my many problems, of course, is that I didn't really come out of the Union College in Belfast. I was doing theology in North America, but so I sort of bypassed that, and it did leave a bit of a chunk of I suppose the inside world of Presbyterian Church in Ireland that I've been rather oblivious to. But Lawrence, not of his own accord or doing, it did become a wee bit of a celebrity, if you want a better word, through things that took place through the establishment and the elites sort of taken a bit of a umbrage. It's not unusual. We've been learning in our podcast series that there's very little these people will go after or interfere in that they don't destroy and hurt and smash to pieces. So Professor Kirkpatrick taught church history at Union College for many, many years, so well over 20 years. And I'm really just going to start by asking him, Lawrence would often call to see how my family and I are. He understands through the great mass of people who have been abused and hurt by this awful bullying and abuse of power. And he has shown me and my family compassion and empathy and help at any point should we need it. But I'm just going to ask in the first place, because I didn't really know Lawrence at all, but Lawrence, how on earth did you ever hear about Barry Reid?
Well, welcome to our home, Barry. I came to find out about you in the very bizarrest of circumstances, and I remember it very, very well. It was the start of the autumn semester in 2017.
Wow.
And it's gone back a wee bit.
Okay.
If I'd known what I know now. Anyway, that's another story. You're a learned man and I'm a Carrick man, but well, the Gentiles and the Jews can get on, so we can get on. Okay, first semester in 2017, Union College was part of the Institute of Theology in Queen's, and that's the body that the university set up to run theology. And the boss of the Institute of Theology was a Dr. Joan Rahilly. And it was Joan mentioned your name to me, first of all, because she was talking to a colleague from Queen's outside Union one day. I can't remember the date precisely, but it was that semester. And Principal Carson came exiting out the main door of the college and galloping down the steps, and in a hurry, obviously. And Joan stopped him and said, "Well, what's the rush? Where are you going?" And Stafford replied that he was going to a meeting of Armagh Presbytery, and it was a very important meeting, and they were going to take disciplinary action against the Reverend Barry Reid, quote, because he's been a very naughty boy, end of quote. And he went on to relate how you had been caught with a woman on the back of your motorbike, and that woman was not your wife, and only went to the meeting. And Joan was quite shocked and intrigued by this and came straight into the Institute office asking, does anybody know a Barry Reid? And a search was started immediately, and the only piece of information that was then on the internet about you was a story in the Belfast Telegraph, and I think a local paper from memory, that you had resigned suddenly for personal reasons, full stop, no other information. So this was very intriguing. The implication being, the obvious implication, there was some untoward relationship had been discovered you had been found to be unworthy to continue in the ministry, and the Presbytery were going to take the necessary action. That's how I first heard about you, Barry. I heard no more until after my own trouble started, and that was in June 2018, because of things that I said on Talkback. I've had the opportunity to take a case in the Employment Tribunal, and that's still to be resolved. But in that period when I was suspended and before I was dismissed, I got to be introduced to you and others, 8 or 9 other people, individuals who've all, how do I put it, they've had a very, very rough time, and in my personal opinion, been treated very unjustly by the application of quite flawed processes. That's my opinion from what I've heard of your case and information that you've let me see about how you were treated, and it resonates with how I was treated. And I suppose maybe a bombshell for people. A lot of these people have written their stories down, and I know a dossier of some 180 or 90 pages has been with the Charity Commission in Northern Ireland, asking about the status of PCI. Is it really a charity when it can treat people like this? And I have to say, and I know I'm going on a wee bit, this is supposed to be a conversation, but I know some people who have been treated badly by the church, in my opinion, went to write their stories and just broke down and couldn't because of the trauma. There's a lot of hurt, and I've come to realize there are many, many ordinary Presbyterians faithfully supporting their minister and their congregation and involved actively in it and all of that, and they have no idea that this is going on from the centre or at the higher level in the courts of the church. And I'm also aware of at least another 3 cases in addition to my own that are coming to Employment Tribunal.
Although I don't know Joan Rahilly, and you didn't know me, but without even a process having been followed in somewhere like Union College, someone on the commission of the Armagh Inquisition was already setting a scene. But how sickeningly, just depraved that they keep poking the little people in the eye and telling us about their holiness and their about their need to purify the church and do things like that. And to say that, it just reminds me, Lawrence, of unfortunately, I didn't know you at all at the time,
but never met.
But I was hearing coming from them and filtering down through sort of a smear campaign the time that you were dismissed. To say those things is what even the New Testament would call slander, because in my case, and I believe through getting to know you a little bit, they're saying those things and they haven't a stick of evidence. Well, it exists in their imagination, Lawrence.
This is exactly right. I mean, my speciality is church history, and it's hard not to think of the Spanish Inquisition or any other Inquisition for that matter. The people who quote for the purity of the church have to root out sin within the church for the good of the church and all of that. And they are completely ruthless, and they talk about evidence, but they haven't got evidence. What was said about you in that very brief conversation to Dr. Rahilly was what a betrayal of your private life. You mentioned the New Testament there too. I mean, the verse for this is surely James 3:6, and I don't normally run around throwing proof texts out, but the tongue is set on fire. It's a fire set on fire from hell. The image of hell is a burning lake, sulfur and all the rest of it, and the sparks of it can land on your tongue and it can consume your whole body, says James. And it's evil above everything else in your body. Now, what a text that has just been completely ignored in this case, and the tongues wag. And the thing is, and we've got to realise this, everybody's reputation is vulnerable. And if allegations are being made that are unfounded and not supported, but spreading, like it's a fire spreading, isn't it? And it consumes people's reputations, and down they go in flames. And when other ordinary people hear of this and ask, well, what was all that about? They say, oh, well, we know things. But as I saw with your case, I can't talk about mine, but your case, I've seen the paperwork and I've seen what the Presbytery had, and diddly squat, as a student would say. No evidence was produced, and then they said, "Oh, we've destroyed it." It just
I think
the
what
mind
makes
boggles.
it more devilish and really depraved is the nature of that slander that many have been on the end of. Whenever they bring it into like some sort of a wee soap opera sexual sphere, it really terrorizes their victims, you know. And of course, they don't qualify anything, so they just throw out these
Yeah.
things. And of course, people's minds, you know, they're even saying, you know, oh, you know, we heard from nobody has a name or a face
No,
within these.
correct.
Nameless, faceless person.
Mhm.
So we were told that he had coffee or lunch with this woman or anything.
Mhm.
Like it's they just are igniting what you're describing from James. They're igniting this lake of fire. I think a common thing we've found, even with the channel, the podcast channel, as we've talked to many, and as you said at the beginning, Lawrence, you could quadruple the amount of people that have really been tortured by this purification cult within the church, but they can't bring themselves. They're too hurt. They're too damaged to talk about it.
Absolutely.
And so we're only skimming the top of the iceberg with the people. Sometimes time tells a difference. In my own case, I couldn't speak of it for a couple of years. I just lived in utter trauma.
I remember early on, and I don't know if you've said this, and I haven't seen all the podcasts. You collapsed in the main street in Larne with stress. An ambulance had to come.
An ambulance came.
off
My
the
wife
street.
was well. I almost
You know.
feel. Why do I feel bullied in the same? My wife was there. Maybe oh dear. But yes, thankfully she was there, and we went down for an appointment at Specsavers.
Yeah.
And it was before one of their strange unlicensed meetings in Rich Hill, which was the next day. And I actually was in hospital. I actually collapsed on the street.
Yeah.
But, you know, the way that these stories, like, and in the end, of course, there isn't a jot or a tittle about anything about me on a motor. In fact, they freeze like a rabbit in the headlights if you were to mention my philandering now.
Mm-hmm.
They changed all that over after a while. All that fell through. They don't like the way I talk, etc., etc. In my case, what they started putting around was that, and a solicitor had told them, now, here's what gets a bit odd, because I was lectured to where I'm not allowed a solicitor.
Yeah.
Under the code, but then it transpired that they had a solicitor. But this solicitor apparently told them that if anybody, now they got me to resign, but if anybody resigns, that proves you're guilty of anything that they say. Now, I have said that to police, to solicitors, and they have doubled over in laughter at how ridiculous. But they were in people's homes saying, oh, this proves, in the same way as you having a marriage difficulty proves anything they want to say about you.
Yeah.
Well, apparently, if you resign, it proves you're guilty of anything they say. Now, as a quirky sort of sideline to that, the Law Society of Northern Ireland would be very interested to know who gave this advice, because they would need to be very well insured, because it's utterly ridiculous.
It is.
Like it's
a moment's thought.
It is ridiculous. But again and again, through subject access request for information, this solicitor, that I'm not allowed, but it's a total breach of my human rights, but hey, okay. But they can have one, apparently. Their solicitor is anonymous, wears a balaclava mask, cannot be known, cannot be named. They apparently paid for this advice. And now that is like water, it's like snow off a ditch.
Are you sure he doesn't wear a balaclava and have a job in the Hole in the Wall gang? Because it sounds like about that sort of level.
There seems to be a bit of cover up going on. I can't say, and I'm not going to be like them, where I make things in my imagination facts. I can't say for sure, but it's a very odd situation. And even if you take recently, so, there was a Sunday World article come out, a journalist, Chris Moore, who's looked at abuse in the Roman Catholic Church and other things. His career, he's sort of retired now. He did a little article, and it had people asking questions, if you can imagine. Well, one of the establishment, who is married to the now minister where I was in Caledon and Winterburn, he was being asked with this newspaper article, but eventually his boiler must have blew, and he said to people, now I have signed witness statements by 2 or more witnesses, the most slanderous, utterly horrendous things about me. And I'm going to tell you something, Lawrence. He went round he went round with more slander to the Church of Ireland rector's home, and even said things about you. I will quote, being an immoral man and deserving what you got, etc. But something,
Can I say something about that then? I mean, I know exactly who you're talking about. Whether you want to name him or not, I'm not sure, but I know exactly who you mean. Was part-time lecturer in Union, and I think I've spoken to the man once in my life to say hello, and that was at a 2017 Christmas Carol service in Union. So if he's openly in front of witnesses saying that about me, I would ask the question, and I'll appeal directly to him if he ever sees this. Who told you that? Where did you get that information? Was it from other members of staff in Union or some others in leadership in PCI? I would like to know where you got, and I'm going to put down a little challenge here, personal challenge, if I may, Barry, and hijack your podcast here for a wee second, that if you would like to reflect on what you said that's documented and decide, where you got that information from and have you any evidence, I'm going to challenge you to get in touch with me and come and have a chat with me and show me your evidence. Or if you haven't got the evidence, be big enough to come and have a chat with me and apologise, because I'll tell you now, I will forgive you. I'm mandated to do that as a Christian. I will forgive you. I'll not start a row or a fight, but I think that would be the beginning of a healing process, because we're back to the tongue on fire of hell. And that's an example of how it works. And my reputation there is down in flames from that tongue on fire.
Well, ironically, this man teaches ethics, but he was even saying things like, one of the deep-rooted Judeo-Christian traditions is that, a person is presumed innocent until proven guilty. But in my case, it was my job. He was telling people, well, my resignation proves I'm guilty, or whatever the magisterium of the church says in their imagination you're guilty of. But he also says that it's that person's job to prove themselves, so they can gossip about you, and you have to prove yourself innocent. They have no remit to actually prove anything. Well, actually, it's built, our society is built, and our freedoms are built on a framework of a person is presumed innocent. You start there until proven guilty. It's not.
Well, there's that, absolutely, that's a given, and there's more than that. The people conducting the investigation should be neutral, should they not, and not have already made up their mind or be or be proven, surely. But then sometimes these people in their minds seem to have this idea, but we're different. We can put these things in compartments, and we can set aside our prejudice and things, and we can come at this with a fresh approach. And
I think there's like a weird, almost like a cult religious idea behind it, where they're above normal, natural justice and law. So, like such things as more for like the Gentile dirty masses. If the great establishment of the church in their mind has this, well, everything should be submit to that. Now I did, and just to say to the audience, because you imagine how upset my wife was, and as I said, I have the witness statements, and the Church of Ireland rector is one of them. He was very, very upset. Somebody went to him, had spoken to for counselling. He was so traumatized at the things he was saying. And how he knows any of this, by the way, I don't know. Like, he wasn't a member of
Any commission?
the commission or anything else. It's evident they all talk, as I said, and
Tongues again.
it's tongues again. But I did send the court of his church, where he's married to the minister there, just to say how utterly shocked and hurt my wife and family are at the source of such horrendous wickedness being at the manse in the church, going around saying these things. And after being ignored, after some months, I got a letter just to say that they have decided to do nothing. So an anonymous phone call, they just said they want to ignore it, but a phone call, an anonymous phone call, I still don't know who made it, is made, and they can destroy somebody's life. But if one of their own is involved with witnesses and evidence and utter slander, we can just ignore that. It's so hideous, Lawrence.
It's corrupt. It is corrupt. Anybody on the outside would see that, I think, within any competent open mind. And one of the other things we're going to say about part of the problem is when they conduct these, let's grace them and call them investigations or commissions or whatever. Let's be generous.
Okay.
They never believe for a moment that anybody else will see what they're saying or hear what they're saying or get to know of it. But they don't realise we live in the real world, and there's subject access requests and all sorts of means of getting some of that documentation. And when an ordinary person with an open mind reads it, and they just go, my goodness, what century is this from? They cannot believe it. And that's why I'm very privileged, and I feel very guilty in a sense that I had a contract of employment with the Presbyterian Church in Ireland, which allowed me to make an appeal to an employment tribunal, because I went through the church's processes. And clearly, I'm unhappy at every stage at how it was dealt with, and what evidence was listened to and what evidence was ignored, and all of that. And I, heretical as some might think, I believe the only place I will get a employment tribunal, because the evidence will be weighed by people with open minds and people who are legally trained, and not people who have already made their mind up before the cases.
It's a shared experience now with this abuse of power and this large Stalinist-like federal government, the Presbyterian Church in Ireland. It's a shared experience for those that come under their boot.
It's how you get caught up in it. It's a spider's web.
But you've no right of reply. These things that they call courts, they're not really interested in weighing things up. They have made a decision a long time ago, which they will enact using their power against you. Even if you come up with evidence that contradicts their imagination, that doesn't fit their narrative, and they're not interested. It's not that it's put in and weighed in the scales of justice. They believe that the blinds are pulled and the curtains are pulled on their little rooms.
Nobody will ever see it.
Nobody ever see it, because like in my case, that's whenever I spent banging my head off a wall for a long time trying to get some information about what had gone on, in writing, they actually say, now, I would ask the audience, I don't claim to be an intelligent man, but I would ask the audience to consider this here. I had an inappropriate relationship with a woman. In writing, they say they didn't know or have any awareness I was having an inappropriate relationship with her. Now, how does anyone write such a thing? Now, they also said, based on such amazing logic, that I'm an unworthy father and an unworthy husband and all the rest of it. But how on, it's evidently because they're so cut off from accountability. They never ever believe that anybody will ever come to. And I would say that their grand leader, that the Grand Bishop, Mr. Gribben, is probably egging the idea on. Look, this will never come to light. I will make sure. Like, 3-4 attempts at an appeal, I would say, under any concept of a court system or Presbyterianism, everybody should be entitled to a review. Everybody should be entitled to appeal. Not now we have a system where one person decides whether or not he likes the appeal and then can refuse it. Utter nonsense. But for to say that, they evidently don't believe that anybody will ever hear or know about it.
You see, they believe the church is an island separate from society, and it's their island, so it's their rules that apply, and they decide how to interpret or manipulate anything to get the verdict they want, which they decide beforehand what they want.
Yeah, that's well summed up.
It's you're in a hammer into nothing, which is why, thank God, and I'm not saying it flippantly, there's an employment tribunal system, because I want the evidence weighed and sifted and properly. And if I'm wrong, if I'm misjudging it, so be it. But there's natural justice, and there's people. When I think, and I could get very emotional as well about the 22 years I invested in theological research, publications, and innovative new courses, helping students. I had 10 PhD students at one time, which is unheard of. You're only supposed to have 6 maximum, but some of them were part-time, so I got away with it in the sense, but it was a heavy workload. And as I say, you can be in work for 6:30, you can be home at 9 o'clock and all of that, and there's not one word of thanks. There's just, oh, you didn't do this, you're really not worthy, we don't like this at all, and therefore we've got a replacement here, and we're going to get you out. Realize that it's the real world. In the real world in Northern Ireland today, in Ireland, PCI has dropped in membership an average of 20% in the last 10 years. And in Belfast, it's dropped 40% in the last 10 years. And I'm quoting their own records. I've been saying that for years and getting.
Well, they don't like you saying that.
They don't like me saying that. I know.
Like you saying the truth.
But we're way past. I mean, there's crisis, and it's a thing from history. It recurs a time when a denomination is under siege and under trouble and feels the pressure. They run back to their trenches and they go back to their basics, Westminster Confession, and we try and recreate that 17th century mandate and mindset. And it's not going to work. It's not going to work. And this church is going to get so small and fragmented. And that's the prophet of doom in me saying that. That's me. Church history, I should be looking back.
But it already
here's
has.
Me looking forward.
Yeah.
And I know so many ministers who are struggling to do a decent job in their location and keep their congregation afloat and feed the people and pastor the people and visit the sick and bury the dead and encourage those that are interested and all the rest of it and preach their simple gospel, be like Jesus, all of that. And they don't want anything to do with the central powers. It's a big turnoff, and there's a big problem just under the surface. And that's a very gloomy insight and a gloomy take on it all, but it's my honest opinion.
But like, Lawrence, you're not talking about something that's future tense. It has already arrived.
Well,
and one of the things that really irks and makes these narcissists very angry, and as you say, back into the trenches, is that they can't come to terms with how utterly irrelevant they are. They believe that they're very relevant and all the rest of it, but they're completely removed from reality.
There's a brilliant description of minister. I think it's John Stott, and I believe in preaching, but I might be wrong in that, and it's not my specialist subject. But he talked about the ministers, the quaint relics of a bygone age, answering incomprehensibly the questions no one is asking, and that's what some of these guys are about. We had a serious suggestion. We were talking about it earlier, looking in the college for events that might garner public interest, that we could do a series of lectures and talks, bring the public in and just engage with the whole thing. And the serious suggestion came, the Synod of Dort. And, that speaks for itself. That's so riveting, isn't it? A Synod of Dort, we're going to do a series.
Yeah, but it's where they see their hope is in the past. It's in Jonathan Edwards.
The heroes of the past.
It's the Puritans of the past, and they're going to emulate that and save. Now, of course, the elites believe that they're here now today to save the church, and part of that is purifying it, and that the droves of people that are leaving.
Well,
of course,
they're trying to
and they see them as
send
dead
the
wood,
tide back. You know, it's
and
not
they
going to
sort
happen.
of see them as people of no consequence. They're about a pure church, so it doesn't worry them. You see it in the truth: 40% reduction in the last 10 years. It's dead wood. They're not
smaller, leaner, meaner,
and they're
fitter.
not the real Jonathan Edwards sort of people.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that worries them overly. And of course, in their own imagination, they're the saviors, the new saviors of the church. But Lawrence, we don't use our podcasts. We usually try and keep around half an hour. So
time's up.
I want a big thank you to Lawrence for this afternoon. We've had a chat, harrowing in some ways for us. It's not easy to go over some of these things, but you show yourself a great listener, Lawrence, and that is a very good thing too. So you can speak, but you also have the virtue of listening. So I want to say to the audience, remember to click and subscribe, that you get a notification of the next podcast of the Presbyterian. All subscriptions hopefully generate a little bit of revenue through YouTube, and all of that would go in its entirety to cancer charity in Ireland. So make sure and subscribe and follow and be part of the travels and the talks of the Presbyterian. Thank you.